sauce because it's healthier. Those are a couple of the lines that were in the latest Bluey episode. And I talked about this today in my stories. I want us to really have a good long chat about this. I sent an email or a DM to Bluey on Instagram, and they have seen it but not replied. When I watched this episode over the weekend with my daughters, I was actually shocked because I'm a huge fan of Bluey, and ever since I moved back to Australia, myself and my kids watch Bluey pretty much. We watch one episode at nighttime before bed, and on Sundays the new episode is coming out here every Sunday, and that's very exciting. And we watched the recent one on the weekend, and there's a scene in there. I've got the clip, I've just recorded the clip, and it's in my stories on Instagram. And in the clip, it's everybody sitting down to dinner, and Bandit is there eating, and Bluey asks for more tomato sauce, and Dad gives her more tomato sauce, and then Dad sneakily gets out a different tomato sauce and puts a huge blob on his plate. And Bluey's like, what's that tomato sauce? And Bandit says, oh, that's my tomato sauce. Why can't I have it? Because kids get the healthy one because this one has too much sugar. And then Bluey tries it. Dad lets him try it, and he's like, oh my God, this is beautiful. This is the best tomato sauce. I want that. And Dad continues to say, no, kids get the healthy one. This one has too much sugar. This is for adults. And Bluey says something like, oh, but why do you get the really good one and I get this disgusting one? And that 1 minute of the episode, it just kind of kills the whole Bluey vibe for me. When I was watching that, I was really, really disappointed. And the reason being is because what has essentially been done here is we've allowed a Bluey, which is like something that parents look to for like good parenting, which I agree it normally is really good parenting. They've set a double standard. It's a complete double standard for Bandit to say, oh, I can have this unhealthy tomato sauce that has lots of sugar in it, but it is delicious. But you are a child, so you have to have the healthy version that now Bluey says she doesn't like as much. So what they've done in here is say that healthy food is disgusting and the unhealthy food that is highly sugary is the really good stuff, and Mum and Dad get to eat that. What are your thoughts on this? I'm really curious. Because I'm sort of surprised it hasn't been more around on social media. Today it's Wednesday in Australia, so this came out a couple of days ago, and I'm just quite shocked. So I'm going to be making a reel and a TikTok about it, but I'm really curious if you had any thoughts, feedback. Has anybody else? A lot of people says they haven't seen it yet. But I'm really curious. So at this point, in the last week or so, I've been on 2 different discovery calls, and I've had a few messages back and forth in DMs with several parents who have talked about things like, I don't know how to talk to my kid about healthy foods. One of the parents that I was speaking to on a discovery call was telling me they've got a history of type 2 diabetes in the family, and their 8-year-old is craving sugar and has become very obsessive with it. So I know that this is something that a lot of parents are struggling with, and it all comes down to communication, because the way we talk about food matters. The way that 1 minute segment of Bluey has like really disappointed me as somebody who works in this profession is basically giving the green light for parents to do that. And so where this ties back into parents aren't sure how to talk about these things. Basically, that latest Bluey episode gives you a playbook on what not to say to your child. Don't make it a double standard. We should all be eating the same tomato sauce. And ideally, it is the healthiest version that your family can buy, whatever that may be. For some people, that may be what I look for in a tomato sauce is which one has the most amount of tomato in it. I don't really look at how much sugar there is in it. I know that if a tomato sauce has more, and I'm talking about a ketchup, if a tomato sauce has more actual tomato in it, it will have less added sugar in it. So that's what I look for. Anyway, the point is, if you can be eating the healthiest version of that tomato sauce or whatever it is, and the whole family is eating it, great, that's what you need to do. That is what I would recommend you do. Anyway, So the point is the way we talk about these sorts of things to set our children up to have a healthy relationship with food matters a lot. And that comes through a lot of conversation and the way we communicate with our kids about healthy foods and unhealthy foods, and not labeling them as healthy foods and unhealthy foods is the first way to start going about that. All right, I'm going to go and have a look and see if anybody's commented. Someone says it's not good for anyone. TikTok. Let me just swipe over so I can actually read this. I learned recently that if you swipe over in a live, you can actually see the comments and they're all like big, which means I don't have to be like squinting up there. It's really disappointing we don't have that episode yet. In America, we haven't seen it, but that's disappointing. That one isn't released in the US yet. Okay, I've got it. It's not released in the US, I think, because it's an Australian show. It's probably, this is like one of the, I remember when I was a child, every US show that you wanted to watch always came out first in the US and you couldn't watch it here. And this is like, it's reversed, it's full circle. But yeah, I agree with you. Awakened Mama J. We buy one kind of ketchup and everyone eats that, period. No other options. I completely agree. And that's why I was so flabbergasted in this episode where there even was another option. Because I in my house, it's the same. There's one kind for everybody. But, you know, do you have a like healthier or unhealthier version of things for your kids? I'm very curious about this from like, I have my dietitian eyes and like my expertise, and this is where I fall, but I'm so curious as to what other parents sort of think here. But essentially the issue here is that there's a complete double standard for Bandit versus Bluey. And I was talking to one of my good friends about this the other day. She hadn't seen the episode, but I talked to her about it. We were driving to a play group together, and she hasn't seen it. And I said, "Is it okay if I tell you what I'm thinking about talking about on social media?" And I mentioned it, and she said to me, "Yeah, like that's really not okay." And she actually thinks, she's a teacher, she thinks there's a push for more like educational, like about healthy content this season, because I don't know, in the US, people, if you saw this, I think it was 2 episodes ago where Bandit got on the scale and like grabbed his belly, and it was like a fat shaming thing. And it was like everybody was up in arms about it. There were a lot of posts about it, and they actually changed the episode, which is great. And I have to say, like, when I watched that episode, I was like, oh, that's not great. I wasn't posting about being up in arms about it because they didn't really say like, I hate my body or I'm disgusting or whatever. I thought that was kind of borderline. This episode, though, was beyond, at least for me, way beyond borderline, and definitely deserves a conversation about this, because children are also hearing that. And there have been a few other episodes, like in earlier seasons. If you've seen the ice cream episode, which is a really cute episode, it's actually one of my favorites, but it's Bandit says like, oh, I'm watching my figure, and no, I'm not going to have an ice cream because I'm watching my figure. It's got too much sugar. No, you can't have an ice cream because you had something yesterday. And like that kind of language has been there in some of the other episodes as well, to which I haven't loved, but it hasn't been such a focus. It's been like a 3-second thing and move on. This was like a 1-minute segment of a 7-minute show, which is a lot. And yeah, for me, I was not cool with it, not okay with it. We can definitely do better. It is not helping our children by seeing these references to sugar and sugar being bad, and that Bandit is able to eat one type of ketchup, and the kids have to eat this that the kids have to eat this healthy one that then Bluey says is disgusting, which I don't blame her for saying. If think about it, if you were the child in that situation, you'd also want what your parents are eating, which is why parental modeling is so important. We love Bluey and all the parenting things, but this one is not the way. Yeah, it's really not. And like my friend said, she thinks that there's been a push by the ABC to educate more about healthy foods or healthy habits, which is why there's been one about exercise, and why there's this one now about like having too much sugar and that. And it's just not helpful. So yeah, tying that into what I was saying earlier about a couple of potential clients that I've spoken with on the phone about wanting to know how do they help their older kids that are 5, 6, 7, 8. At the moment, I'm working with a mum who's got a 12 and a 14-year-old, and she's got a 7-year-old, a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 14-year-old. How do we talk to them about like healthy foods? Because especially at 14, like this child, she's really close to being an adult, and a lot like. So we had a call yesterday where she wanted to go and make her own alternative dinner. And mum was like, I'm really not sure what to do in this situation. She is capable of going and doing that, like she wanted to make herself a waffle. And so we had to sit down, the two of us, and talk about where we're coming from to start off with. Where can we comfortably set this boundary where, yes, they can make that choice. Yes, they are capable of making their own meal, but we need to set this boundary of, well, just because you can make your own meal doesn't mean that you're allowed to. Like, there is a boundary in the house where this is the meal that mum's made, and this is the meal that is being offered, and you can't go and make an alternative. And the way we go about doing that, so mum actually repeated it back to me. She's like, okay, so I kind of need to say, like, this is the meal. If you're hungry, you need to eat this meal. And I said, yes, that is essentially what we're saying in essence, but we're not actually going to say those words, because that in and of itself is actually making it, that's the negative language that you can use. This is the meal I made you, and this is the meal you have to eat if you're hungry. I don't recommend ever saying that. Instead, we kind of wordsmithed it to something more along the lines of, hey, I understand that you want to make something else for yourself. This is the meal that's on our meal plan today and on our menu. This is the meal that's available. Perhaps we can talk about what we can add to it to make it a little bit more what you're comfortable with. This is what's being served. So we're not saying no, we're not saying you have to eat it, but we are still very firmly setting this boundary and keeping it there. So this month, I have an online course called Mealtimes Without Meltdowns, and there's been thousands of people across the world who have taken this course. And this month only, it's my birthday month, and it's also May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so this month only, I'm doing my first ever Zoom live stream for parents who enroll in the course. There is no janky sales pitch at the end. It is simply a Q&A. I'm going to do it towards the end of the month, where you'll get an invite, an email with the Zoom link, where you can join and just ask questions. It's a live Q&A just like this one. There's no sales pitch. I'm not trying to get you to buy anything else. It's just, as you're working through the course, write down your questions, join me on the live stream, and ask me questions. You'll kind of get a taste. That's sort of what it's like when I do a live with my groups that I coach, although my groups are really small, so there's a lot of back and forth. I'm really curious to see how this live goes. I'm very excited about being able to meet some more people and just have like a very chill back and forth conversation and actually get to see your faces. That's the nicest part about Zoom, where we actually do I actually get to see you. You see me. I've had parents that when I've met with them on the phone for the first time on a discovery call, they'll say like, oh, I kind of feel like I know you. And, that's really nice. And it's also really nice on my side of things to be able to meet and see your face and actually speak to you and have a bit of a back and forth and understand what's going on in your situation. So if you've got any questions about that, the link to the course is in my bio. It's called Mealtimes Without Meltdowns. You need to click on Mealtimes Without Meltdowns in the link. If you have any other questions, you can always send me a private message. But I wanted to come on today and talk about that Bluey episode. Taylor asks, do you have specialized courses on kids that have food anxiety and fear? Taylor, if you and I were having a conversation, I would want to ask you a few more questions. What level of anxiety and fear does your child have? How old are they? Can you give me sort of an explanation of like how does that manifest at mealtimes? Is it your kid running away from the table? Is it that they are refusing to eat a food? Do they freak out if you put a certain food on their plate? It really depends. The course is because it's an online course, it's all pre-recorded content, it's video content, so you can see me, you can see how I'm talking, because again, communication is a really big part of how I help families that have extreme picky eaters. Not only the words that you say, but how you say it, how you actually connect with them. And that comes across really nicely in a video call or a video in a recorded video. It is general advice. It's not specific. That's the thing. That's where if you're having a bigger issue, where it's better to work with me either in a group or one-on-one. His 3 has never been a great eater. If it's something new, he will try it if we ask, but will shake and start to panic. Okay. So what that sounds like, and this is what the course will help you with, is reducing the pressure. Because I swear, I talk about pressure all the time on here. And when I get on the phone with people, because I'm talking about it so much on here, whenever I get on the phone with a potential client, they'll say, like, we've removed pressure, we're no longer pressuring. And I'll ask them more questions about, tell me about what a typical mealtime is like. And when they describe the typical meal, they've removed big things of pressure. Like, you need to eat this if you want to have your iPad. That's removing a really big form of pressure, which is great. I will say, though, asking him to try something new, again, I don't know how you're asking. I don't know what words you're using. I don't know your tone. I don't know those sorts of things. So it depends how you're doing it. However, it sounds like with his response of shaking and starting to panic, it sounds like he's feeling pressured. What really matters here is if the kid is feeling like we're pressuring them, we are pressuring them. Pressuring can be looking at them. Imagine if you're sitting in a restaurant and you're with a friend and your friend is just staring at you while you're eating. It makes you uncomfortable, and that is pressure. Oh God, this is a story I have on my YouTube channel, actually. If you haven't been to my YouTube channel, there's so much content on there, like longer form videos, like coaching videos and stuff. There's one there about cow tongue, and it was when I tried cow tongue for the first time. And my now ex-mother-in-law made it, and she was telling me how nice it is and how everybody loves it, and I had never had it before. But when it came time to eat it, everybody was really excited for me to try it. And I was an adult. I felt pressured. I'm like, what if I don't like it? Am I going to hurt someone's feelings? What if I spit it out? Like, I was worried. And even though I was a somewhat confident, probably 19-year-old, maybe 18, 19 years old at the time, I felt pressured. Okay. And I'm in a position where I am, well, ex-mother-in-law, like, you're not really equal. Actually, this is a great analogy for the parent-child relationship, because you as the parent are in a position of power. I, as the very soon to be like daughter-in-law, I'm in a place of like under the authority, right? Like a child, like basically a child. Funny that, because I kind of was almost a child. But anyway, I was still an adult. But your child, you are the authority person for your child. If you are telling your child to eat something or try something, it's really hard for them to say no. They can say no, but there are consequences with that. Anyway, so somebody says, my child is speech delayed. I have a hard time communicating. He needs to eat veggies and meat. Okay, so this again sounds like pressuring, because what we're doing, so there's a great, I was in a call with someone who was, I can't remember if it was a group client or a one-on-one client, but the dad was saying, I need to explain to him why he needs to eat these things so that he can grow up big and strong. That's pressuring. If you say that to a child, a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old or even an 8-year-old, they're going to think, if I don't eat this, I'm not going to grow up and be healthy and strong. That's a huge amount of pressure. So just because a child is speech delayed doesn't mean they can't understand everything. I don't know your specific situation, Amani. It really depends on your child. Usually what I will say for anybody that has like a more underlying condition, it's better for us to work closer together one-on-one, because like, for example, I work with a number of neurodiverse children who some of whom have major speech delay and major difficulties comprehending things, in which case the way we talk to them has to be very different than how we would talk to a typical normal neurotypical child. That's different. So back to Taylor, I'm not sure if you're still on the live. It sounds like you would really benefit from the online course, the Mealtimes Without Meltdowns course. And because this month, when you enroll, you will get an invite at the end of the month to join me on a live stream, a Zoom live stream, where we can see each other face to face. You can ask me questions. It's going to be just like this, but better, because I'll be able to see you and we'll be able to actually engage in a conversation. Like I said, there's no sales pitch. I'm not selling you to join anything, but it gives you a chance. what I would suggest in your situation, if you're working on removing pressure, I would start with the online course before you jump into working with me anyway, because the online course is $149. It works out to be like $3 a lesson. It's so cheap. And there's within the course itself, there's not only like, it's all video lessons, it's not a voiceover, it's actually you see me, and there's a lot of handouts with, like, there's a phrase guide, there are nutrient guides, there are snack guides, there are all kinds of things that will help you out that you can print off. There are some mindset exercises that I would encourage you to do with your spouse as well for catching those comments that are pressuring. I would definitely look into the course, and then you get to see me in a live at the end of the month where you can ask me questions and see how you're going. Because like I've worked with kids that have the picky eating disorder, which is avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, called ARFID, ARFID, and those children have like massive anxiety when it comes to food. And somebody like that, I definitely don't recommend doing the course by itself. So when someone signs up to work with me, when they join my wait list for coaching, they get access to my online courses. And I always say, please start going through the courses before we get on our call together. If you join a group, same thing. As soon as you join the group, you get access to the online courses. And I ask you, please do them before we meet for our first call, because that way you get a bit of time to solidify some of the really basic foundational concepts before we meet. So if you're watching this and you're like, oh, I'm thinking about this course, I would 100%, if it was me, I'd be like, I'm going to go buy this course today, start working through it. It's like it's probably a little bit over an hour. Everything is in like small chunks, like each video is between 3 and 8 minutes. The longest one is 8 minutes, so that you can start and stop it. Because when I made these, I had 2 young toddlers at home, and ain't nobody got time to sit and watch an hour uninterrupted unless it's nighttime. So you can start and stop it as you need to. But then if you get started on it now, and you can get through some of it with your spouse as well, you can both join the live stream and ask me questions at the end of the month when you've already tried to implement some things. Hey, I'm having this question about this, or hey, my child is doing this random thing when I say that the kitchen is closed. These are the types of things that will be really helpful for you once you've started implementing them. If you wait for another 2 weeks and you're like, oh, I'm gonna like either binge watch the course in one night and then join the live stream, or I'm gonna get like 5 minutes into the course and join the live stream, you're not going to get as much out of it, because we're going to be talking about concepts that you may not have gotten to in the course yet. So again, if it was me, I'd be like, this is the thing I've been thinking about it. I want to do it. I like your videos. I like, if you do, you might not. I take a very respectful approach to feeding. The parent-child relationship is paramount to me. There's no compromising that. Your child eating a piece of broccoli is not more important than your child trusting you. Your child trusting you and having an honest, open, communicative relationship is the most important thing. I think a lot of my own experiences have informed the way I approach parenting, as well as what's evidence-based in my profession as a dietitian. In case I'm not sure how many of you follow me. I talk more about this on Instagram than I do on TikTok. I myself have left at a domestic violence and family violence marriage in the last year and a half, and things are still very much ongoing here. I was in this marriage for a very long time, and when I talk about building trust, I also spend a lot of time with my one-on-one clients talking about how, like, I'll have some parents say like, oh, my child's a people pleaser. And I'm like, great, let's work on that too. Because like on a deeper level, like we're still working on it in terms of food and meal times and whatnot. However, if your child, part of what I find really important as a human who works with other parents is, how do we set children up in the best way possible to have healthy relationships? And I know that like, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not trained as a psychologist. Food psychology is one thing, and that's something that I am trained in. However, when it comes to helping your child actually eat food, there are things that work with communication, and then there are things that don't work. And I work within those bounds of what's respectful. How do we communicate? How do I talk to my kid about this so that they want to listen and so that they actually want to try it? Taylor, I've tried local therapy for food and no one has ever tried anything other than just keep offering. Yeah, that's shit. I'm sorry. That's like, So not helpful. And you know what's funny? I just actually posted a video on TikTok today. If you haven't seen it, please go and have a look at it. I went to the dentist yesterday and I spoke to my hygienist. I actually say dentist in the video, but it was actually my hygienist, was talking about how in her profession that people will go to the doctor for something like a toothache, and that she was telling me like, oh, doctors are not helpful when it comes to things like that. And I'm like, no, they're not. I'm a dietitian, and I hear from a lot of parents that I get on the phone with that have been, I don't know if medically gaslit is the right term, but have been just dismissed, have been given terrible advice and just be dismissed about major food issues. If your child is not eating from a variety of food groups, that's not normal. That's not okay. Where it may be common, like, yes, there are lots of children who don't eat from all the food groups. It's common. It's not normal. It's not a good thing. It's not something that you want to continue. So, yeah, I very much understand that that's what you've been told there is completely not helpful, because just keeping on offering that I'm not against that advice. I'm very much of the same mind. Like, if you don't offer it, your kid's never going to try it. But if all you're doing is putting the food on the table and then expecting them to eat it, they're not going to eat it. That's the thing. And what we need to change here is what we can control. We can control the way we communicate with our children. We control how we facilitate interactions with food, which again comes down to communication with children. And that's what I help you with. It's a sort of very gray area where some parents have messaged me like, oh, I didn't know that a dietitian could help with this. I sort of work in a gray area of dietetics because I don't give you a meal plan. That does not help you. You know what you need your child to eat. You know that you want them to eat fiber, vegetables, fruits, meats, and a variety of foods. You know that. You don't need help with that. You need help with how do you get your child to eat the thing. That's what I help you with. All right, I've seen some comments come in. Just give me 1 minute. Deanna just took our child into our care. Has lived vegetarian his whole life. How do I introduce veggies? He really only eats fruit and more chunky toddler food. That's a really good question. And that's a wonderful thing that you're doing as well. I had a client that I worked with that had 2 adopted children, and they had some food insecurity in their background. And like the children came from places that were food insecure. So the way we have to work with that is a little bit different. So I cannot give you specific advice because I don't know what that child has come from. But I would encourage you to reach out to me. I really do have a soft spot for anybody who is fostering or has adopted a child. So please feel free to reach out to me. Just let me know that we chatted or I chatted to you on the live. Maggie, I once had a pediatrician tell my child won't starve themselves. He couldn't be more wrong. He couldn't care less about eating. Avid. Switched doctors after that. I'm so glad you switched doctors after that. Maggie, your name looks very familiar. I feel as though we might be having a conversation in DM at the moment. That's absolutely not accurate. And I actually did a video about this that I think I've shared now on Instagram as well as TikTok about how back in my postgrad work, when I was studying to become a dietitian in my master's, they would say things like, no healthy child self-starves. And I did post a whole video about that, about how I'm almost ashamed to believe that I believe that, because I've worked with a number of children who will legitimately not eat like what you're describing. They legitimately will not eat. They will go a full day without eating. That's not typical behavior, and it does happen. Sometimes it's a child being very strong-willed, and other times it's a child, like you said, just not interested in eating, and that requires a different approach. It's completely not helpful to a parent who is actually living this experience of their child not eating for someone to say, don't worry, they won't starve themselves. It's so not helpful. It makes you feel so invalidated. It makes you feel like you're doing something wrong. It's not okay, and I'm really sorry that has happened to you. I've made friends with a couple of really wonderful people that live in my community, both of whom have two children that are neurodivergent, very differently neurodivergent. And what what works for one kid doesn't work for the other kid. What works for my kid doesn't work for either of those kids. It's completely different. And that's why if you're seeing any kind of professional, especially a doctor who is in a position of power and they're telling you, don't worry, it's fine, it's almost definitely not fine. And it's almost definite that you should go and find a different pediatrician or ask them to refer you to somebody who can help you. Okay, I understand. Like, if it was me, like, the thing is, you have to advocate in healthcare. I don't know where you are, which country you're in. I've lived in America and Australia. If you don't advocate for your child, no one is going to advocate for them. If you think there is something wrong, if you think your child needs to be tested for avid, and your doctor is saying, no, they don't have that, I would like a reference, please, to somebody who knows about avid and is willing to do a diagnosis. And if you're still not happy and your doctor says, well, I can do a diagnosis, if you still don't believe that they're taking it seriously, I really appreciate that. I would like a reference to another doctor for a second opinion, please. ARFID, it's ARFID, is Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder. It is a relatively new diagnosis. It's only been in the DSM-5 for the last 10 years. It is essentially the picky eating disorder. I've worked with a number of kids that have it. I'm working with a kid at the moment who has it. He's made amazing progress. And let me tell you, I've done a few videos about this in some of my social media posts. Children with avid can be managed, and it's not just managed, they can be helped. So the first month that I was working with this couple, they are seeing another dietitian. They've seen a number of other therapists, and they're still seeing another dietitian currently, as well as seeing me. And they're like, no one's been able to help us really make good progress. And in the first month that we worked together, we were pretty much solely focused on changing their communication because they were pressuring him. They didn't realize that they were. It was we talked about this earlier on. There are so many forms of pressure that parents, there's the big pressure, if you don't eat that or if you don't taste it, you're not going to get your iPad or you're not going to get dessert. That's a really big form of pressure. And most parents will remove that before they get on the phone to speak with me. And they're like, we've removed all forms of pressure. But when I ask them, tell me a bit about your meal times, they'll tell me some of the things that they're saying. And even this very, very well-intentioned, intelligent couple said that they'd removed all forms of pressure when they were telling me about some of the things that they were saying and how they were trying to help their child. He's 6 years old and he has avid. I was, okay, we need to take this back. There's still pressure there. And after about a month of being very conscious of how they were talking to him, he was no longer having meltdowns every day. He went from having a massive meltdown 6 out of 7 days a week to now having barely ever even one meltdown about food in a week. I asked them a few months ago. This might have been 2.5, maybe 2 months after we started working together, where Dad was like, we are hardly ever having a meltdown now. That's amazing. And that's because they changed their communication. Communication is the key. It is so incredibly important when it comes to helping children that are picky eaters. Communication is something that you control. You control your communication. When you change your communication, you are setting yourself up to be successful. And a lot of parents have the best of intentions, but the way they communicate with their best of intentions can really undermine what they're trying to do because it still comes as pressure. And like I said earlier on, it's almost time for me to go. Like I said earlier, I do have a free phrase guide, link in my bio. My online course, Mealtimes Without Meltdowns, will help you so much when it comes to decreasing the pressure and changing your language and the way you communicate with your child. And this month, because it's the month of May, which is my birthday month, and it's also Mental Health Awareness Month, I'm doing a special a Zoom live stream for parents who enroll in the Mealtimes course this month. The live will be at the end of the month. The course itself is $149 US. It works out to be about $3 a lesson. There are a bunch of handouts in there. There's a snack guide, there's a lunch guide, there's a phrase guide, there are nutrient guides. You can print them out. They're easy to read. You can stick them on your fridge. A lot of my clients use them as well. I made this before I was even working with clients, and I've added a lot of new things to it since I've been working with clients. So this month, when you join, you will get an invite later on in the month to join this live stream. Key, do I have helpful? I'll come back to that question in just a second. Do I have helpful things for teens? Just hold on. So you can join the live stream at the end of the month. I mentioned earlier, if I was in your situation and I'm like, you know what, I really like what you're saying, and I do have a picky eater. If it was me, I'd be running to enroll in this course now so that I can start working through it. The course will take you a little bit over an hour to complete, but the videos are short. They're between 3 minutes and the longest one is about 8 minutes. So you can do like one video every day until you're finished with it, and then join the live stream once you've started implementing. And ask me questions. The whole point of the live stream is to just ask me questions about what you're implementing, what you've learned in the course, and if you need help with it. There are no strings attached. There's no cost to it. There's no sales pitch at the end. I'm just excited to be able to offer this. And it's also, like I said, mental health awareness month. And a lot of the parents I speak with feel like this is taking a toll on their mental health. And as someone who have had postpartum depression, I've had postpartum anxiety, I've had both of those things used against me by my ex-husband, I very much understand how important mental health is. And this is like one little thing that I can do is host a live stream to help parents. I'm going to do that. So the link to the Mealtimes course is in my bio, and you can always private message me on Instagram or TikTok or on Facebook if you have any questions. Last thing I'm going to answer is Key's question about teens. For teens, so the course is really directed at children under the age of 10. And I've had parents with kids that are 10 that have gotten a lot out of it. The way you communicate with an older child is going to be different than the way you communicate with a younger child. What I would recommend for older kids, there's a lot more complications, I suppose, with older kids because they have so much peer influence. They are out and they are very autonomous. They have a much deeper level of way that they can think compared to a 3-year-old. What I would recommend, if you feel Key like you need help, please send me a DM. Let me know that you came from the live today, and I'd like to set up a discovery call with you. We can chat. At the moment, I've got a client that has 3 kids in their teens, well, 14, 12, and 10, and also 7. But I'm talking about the older kids here. I'm more equipped to help you with that in a one-on-one setting rather than just the course. So feel free to send me a DM and we can talk about where we get started. All right. And if you have any other, will the course be beneficial for an 18-month-old? She's not quite at the age where I can communicate. Yes, it is. So I have an online course for babies that are under 12 months, but unless you're doing you're well beyond weaning, if you need help with weaning and you want to set up like a positive relationship with food and you want to set up excellent communication at mealtime so that you never get to the point where you have a picky eater, that course is called Fuss-Free First Foods. Highly recommend that one. You can also gift it to a friend who's pregnant or about to have a baby or about to start solids. Recommend that. For your 18-month-old, yes, Mealtimes Without Meltdowns. There's a whole section about toddlers, which your child is absolutely at. She can't communicate with words yet to you, but you can communicate with her, and I guarantee you she understands way more than you expect her to. Babies are really smart. And there's one thing that I've learned is that a lot of parents underestimate how smart their toddlers are. So your 18-month-old 100% can understand, if not every word that you're saying, almost every word you're saying. So yes, please, the course is absolutely useful for you. And the earlier you start, the better. I actually made the Fuss-Free First Foods course for under 12 months old. It was in the first year that I started coaching one-on-one clients, because all my clients said, my God, I wish this was available when my child was a baby. I would have been able to avoid so much stress and so many issues. So 100%, if you know someone who has a baby, who's pregnant, this is the best time to give them the information and the tools they need to avoid picky eating so that they can start their eating journey with so much more confidence than what a lot of parents start with. The live you're planning on doing sounds super beneficial. Thank you. I think it will be great. I know it will be great, actually, because I'm always energized when I'm on a live and I can only see myself here. I would love to be able to see other faces asking me questions. All right. The link to all of that is in my bio. If you've got questions, send me a private message. Have a wonderful day, and I will speak to you soon. Bye.